What if a company had no CEO, no board of directors, no headquarters, and no single person who could unilaterally make decisions? What if the rules were written in code, the treasury was publicly visible on a blockchain, and every member got a vote proportional to their stake? That's the idea behind a DAO. And in 2026, it's no longer theoretical. There are over 13,000 DAOs globally, collectively managing more than $24 billion in treasury assets. Over 6.5 million people hold governance tokens. The concept has moved well past proof of concept. But understanding what a DAO actually is, and where the model still has real limitations, is worth doing properly. What a DAO actually is. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Break that down literally. Decentralized means no single controlling entity. Autonomous means rules execute automatically through smart contracts. Organization means it coordinates people around a shared goal. In practice, a DAO is a group of people who pool resources and make collective decisions through on-chain governance. Members hold governance tokens. Those tokens represent voting power. Proposals get submitted, discussed, voted on, and, if passed, executed automatically by smart contracts without requiring anyone to manually approve or implement them. The key difference from a traditional organization isn't just the technology, it's the transparency. Every proposal, every vote, every treasury transaction is publicly visible on the blockchain. Anyone can verify what happened, when, and who voted for what. How governance actually works. Most DAOs run a two-step process. First, an off-chain signal, typically on Snapshot, a gas-free voting platform, where members indicate their preference without paying transaction fees. If the signal shows sufficient support, the proposal moves to on-chain voting, where the result is binding and executed by the smart contract. The threshold to pass a proposal varies by DAO. Most require a minimum quorum plus a majority in favor. Some DAOs use simple majority. Others require supermajorities of 60 or 66% for significant decisions like treasury expenditure or protocol changes. Token-weighted voting is the dominant model, one token, one vote. Some DAOs are experimenting with alternatives. Quadratic voting, where doubling your influence requires 4 times the tokens, designed to reduce the advantage of large holders, or reputation-based systems, where voting weight comes from contribution history rather than token balance. The real numbers in 2026. The scale of DAOs today is worth putting in concrete terms. Optimism DAO holds the largest treasury at $3.8 billion. Uniswap DAO sits at $2.9 billion. Mantle DAO at $2.7 billion. Arbitrum at $1.1 billion. Collectively, the top 5 DAOs control the majority of the $24.5 billion in total DAO treasury assets tracked across the space. Over 80% of active DAOs were launched after 2020. Non-financial DAOs, gaming, media, social coordination, grew more than 25% year over year in 2024. The model has expanded well beyond DeFi. What DAOs are actually used for protocol governance is the most established use case. MakerDAO governs the DAI stablecoin. Decisions about collateral types, stability fees, and risk parameters are all made by MKR token holders. Uniswap governance controls the protocol's fee structure, treasury deployment, and major upgrades. These aren't symbolic votes. They're decisions that move billions of dollars in liquidity. Investment DAOs pool capital to make collective investment decisions. Members contribute funds, propose investments, vote on allocations. The structure gives smaller participants access to deal flow and coordination that would otherwise require institutional scale. Grant DAOs fund ecosystem development. Gitcoin has distributed hundreds of millions in grants to open-source developers through community-governed allocation. Noun's DAO generates 1 NFT per day, auctioning each one and routing proceeds directly to a community treasury that members vote on how to deploy. Social DAOs organize communities around shared interests: media production, creator collectives, professional networks. Friends with Benefits started as a token-gated Discord and has grown into a globally distributed creative organization. Where the model still has real limitations, voter participation is the most persistent challenge. Average governance participation across DAOs sits at around 17% of eligible voters. Even in high-stakes votes, most token holders don't engage. When participation is low, a relatively small number of active voters effectively determine outcomes. Governance token concentration is a related concern. In many DAOs, a significant share of voting power is held by a small number of wallets, early investors, protocol teams, and large holders. This doesn't make DAOs flawed by design, but it does mean the voting distribution often looks less flat than the decentralization framing implies. DAOs implementing delegated voting, where token holders assign their votes to active delegates, report 30 to 50% higher governance efficiency, which is one practical response to the participation problem. Decision-making speed is genuinely slow. A typical governance cycle runs 2 to 4 weeks from proposal to execution. For a protocol that needs to respond quickly to a market event or security issue, that timeline is a real constraint. Most major DAOs address this with time-locked multisigs for emergency actions, a smaller trusted group authorized to act quickly in defined circumstances, with the broader community retaining oversight. Smart contract risk is a structural reality. In 2023, over $500 million was lost to DeFi and DAO-related exploits. A DAO's governance process can be perfectly well designed and still be undermined by a vulnerability in the smart contract executing its decisions. Audits and bug bounties reduce the risk but don't eliminate it. The regulatory picture in 2026 legal status for DAOs varies considerably by jurisdiction. Wyoming in the U.S. recognizes DAOs as legal entities. The Marshall Islands formally legalized them. The EU's MiCA framework creates some structure for token-based governance, but leaves significant questions open around member liability. The core legal question is whether DAO members can be held liable for governance decisions that cause harm. Courts in different jurisdictions are starting to engage with this directly, and the answers are not yet settled. For anyone participating in DAO governance in an active or delegate capacity, this is worth understanding. What the evolution looks like: DAOs grew quieter and more concentrated in 2025, with voter counts and proposal volumes declining in major protocols. The raw growth phase is over. What's replacing it is a more mature governance layer. Smaller active communities making more consequential decisions, with better tooling and more clearly defined roles. AI-assisted governance is an emerging development. Automated agents that summarize proposals, model economic outcomes, and flag potential conflicts of interest are being piloted in several major DAOs. The goal isn't to replace human judgment, but to lower the participation barrier for people who don't have the time to analyze every proposal in depth. The fundamental idea behind a DAO, that organizations can operate transparently, without centralized control, governed by code and community rather than hierarchy, is sound. The execution in 2026 is still evolving. The tooling is improving. The participation problem is real and unsolved. The legal environment is catching up. What's already clear is that DAOs have moved from experiment to infrastructure. The question isn't whether they work, it's how to make them work better.